I worked with a lot of brain injury and stroke survivors one-on-one. Folks kind of go through the rehabilitation process, and then when it's over, they're sort of, a little cast adrift. And folks would reach out looking for one-on-one treatment and say, like, I'm better, but I'm not better enough to go back to work. Can you help me with my language skills? Can you help me with my cognitive skills to kind of get me there? And somewhere along the line, I was like, the gym would be a really good place for a lot of these people, for so many reasons, targeting language and cognition, but also just functional independence. And so I started bringing clients into the gym one-on-one, and then it sort of went from there.
Hello, and welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm Dr. Julie Fouché, family physician and former CrossFit Games athlete. Here, I bring you information and inspiration to help bridge the gap between fitness and medicine and support your journey toward your healthiest self. Now, in this week's episode, I got to share a conversation with Jenna Muri-Rosenthal, who's a speech-language pathologist, certified brain injury specialist, and a CrossFit Level 2 trainer. Jenna saw a big gap between what's typically considered good enough in a traditional rehab setting and the potential of brain injury and stroke survivors to regain more function in their daily lives. So she created a really neat program called Fit to Function Recovery and started training clients in her CrossFit affiliate, and she saw some really incredible results. In this episode, we talk about the benefits of CrossFit for those recovering from cognitive impairments, how the training community can better serve this population, and some resources for those looking to help for themselves or for a loved one. But before we dive into the episode, I do want to make it clear that this podcast is for general information only and does not provide medical advice. So with that, I recommend that you seek assistance from your personal physician for any health conditions or concerns. Now, let's get started with the episode. Welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm excited to be here today with Jenna Muri-Rosenthal, who is a founder of Fit to Function Recovery. And I learned just recently about what you are doing through Invictus Boston and really working with individuals recovering from brain injury and helping them regain a lot of function and get back to their goals and their lives. And so I'm excited to learn more about it. I thought maybe you could just start by how did you develop an interest in working with this population?
Yeah, sure. So first, thanks for having me. This is great. So I'm actually a speech and language pathologist, and I've worked in inpatient rehabilitation and acute care hospital life for over a dozen years. And about halfway through that career, I found CrossFit and sort of found like, well, hey, this jives a little bit with what I do, which rehabilitation is a lot of, I always say, asking individuals to do things that are really hard. And coaching them through things that are really difficult to make them better, help them get better and better themselves. And so I thought, I want to coach as well. It really fits with what I'm doing in a whole different way. And in the ensuing years, I worked with a lot of brain injury and stroke survivors one-on-one. Folks kind of go through the rehabilitation process, and then when it's over, they're sort of, a little cast adrift. And folks would reach out looking for one-on-one treatment and say, like, I'm better, but I'm not better enough to go back to work. Can you help me with my language skills? Can you help me with my cognitive skills to kind of get me there? And somewhere along the line, I was like, the gym would be a really good place for a lot of these people, for so many reasons, targeting language and cognition, but also just functional independence. And so I started bringing clients into the gym one-on-one, and then it sort of went from there.
That's amazing. Now, how did you decide to go into speech and language pathology in the first place?
Oh, it's a great question. I worked with kids. I was a teacher, and I actually sort of fell in love with the autism population. I was a one-on-one aide for a kiddo with autism for a while, and I met a speech pathologist in a school who was running a social skills lesson, and it was a fake ice cream shop. And all the kids had to come in and practice their social skills, kind of ordering and talking and whatnot. And I was like, that is really great. That is what I want to do. And I applied to grad school. I wrote all my entrance exams about the autism spectrum disorder and that population. And then for my adult clinical placement, I ended up at Spalding on the brain injury unit. And within a week, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I never looked back. It's just something about, I spent a lot of time working with kids, and I love working with children. But they're sort of held to a higher standard, and that there's all these norms that we expect people to be, and things they needed to achieve. And one of the things I loved about working with adults was the goal is getting you back to you.
Mm.
And the norms were established based on who you were and what you wanted and your personal goals. And that kind of drove me forward. And I think with brain injury, you get so much of what we do speech and language and swallowing and cognition and voicing and swallowing and breathing and all of these things that a traumatic brain injury might result in kind of one area of need there or all of them. So I just liked the variation in the population.
That's amazing. And I can see, I wouldn't initially have thought of the overlap between that and CrossFit, but the way that you explain it, it's very obvious. It's how you can apply CrossFit to anything in life. It's doing hard things and coaching people through it. How did you first get into CrossFit? What was your athletic background before, or what attracted you to it?
Yeah. So I played sports when I was younger. I played Division III sports in college. I was always sort of like an overweight kid, and I really loved sports, but I wasn't really great at them. I sort of just had, what's that?
What sports did you play?
I played soccer, basketball, and softball. Okay. Basketball was my favorite, but I was a little on the heavy side, not fast and not very tall. Like I'm 5'6", 5'7", which kind of puts you in that middle range of like if you're not fast enough to be a guard, you're not quite tall enough to be a forward. And so I loved it. And, all the sports I played, I just did with 100% effort. And I sort of was like, I'll just try as hard as possible to be the best that I can. And after college fell off and sports just, team sort of intramural sports rather didn't quite do the trick, because unless you're a hot shot superstar, it's hard to have as much fun because I was kind of a team player. And then found a CrossFit in our area after multiple attempts at fitness and immediately was like, this is what I love. The everyday challenge, the community, kind of the team aspect. It was like, there were just so many things there that it really filled that sports void for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can relate to that too. It's so hard to go from that team environment or having a coach, having to practice every day to just figuring it out on your own. And I definitely felt that when I found CrossFit too.
Yeah. The like shared goal of kind of what you're accomplishing, that there's a challenge every day, but you're also sort of all seeking something and you're all supporting one another. That really kind of fit the bill. And also just as an athlete, I'm so used to you go to practice and somebody just tells you what to do. Exactly. And you get your exercise by somebody saying, I'm like, you want me to run sprints? I will run them all day, but left to my own devices, I could never figure that out. And then CrossFit, I was like, great, 60 minutes, you're going to tell me exactly what to do and I'm going to get the work done.
Totally. Just take the decision making out of it and let someone else know what to do. I totally agree.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I've always loved teaching and I'm a professor as well as a speech pathologist. And I think one of the things that I was really fascinated with really quickly within the CrossFit realm is how much there is to learn in each skill. It's not just fitness. It's like, if you want to get good at a certain thing, you got to learn the technique and you've got to practice and you got to break it down and build it back up again, which fits with cognitive rehab and fits with teaching. And I was like, oh yeah, I want to teach people how to do this too.
That's amazing. So I've seen you share the statistic from the CDC that there's 5.3 million individuals living with a disability as a result of a brain injury. So that's a lot of people. But you also talk a lot about the limitations of our current healthcare system and insurance system and helping get these people what they need to really regain function and get back into their lives the way that they might want to. And so could you just take us through sort of how the traditional sort of trajectory works for someone who may suffer from a brain injury, and then what happens as they go through the recovery process through the insurance system?
Yeah, sure. Insurance is sort of a tricky beast, and everyone's trajectory, unfortunately, is a little bit different based on what kind of insurance they have, or maybe if they don't have any. Mm-hmm. But the kind of general way it works is you have your injury, your stroke or your traumatic brain injury, and you're hospitalized. And in the hospital setting, the physicians are sort of caring for your acute needs, but also the rehabilitation team is right there at the beginning. So your physical therapist, your occupational therapist, and your speech therapist, which were sort of the lesser known of that group. But early on, it's our job to help prognosticate, help figure out what do you need in terms of your communication capabilities to kind of get back to everyday function. What's your attention and memory like? Can you be safe at home? Will you remember not to, turn the stove on and walk out the door? And swallowing is a part of that too. So in the early phases, the rehab team is there helping to say, okay, what do you do next? Where do you go? And that, from there, once you're quote medically ready and stable enough to leave a hospital, a lot of folks will go to an inpatient rehabilitation hospital. So still a hospital, still requiring some medical care, but not quite as much. And the focus there is really on your rehabilitation. So, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, where they're sort of driving, okay, how can we get you as independent as possible with the way you move and the way you think to get you home? Now, that doesn't work for everyone. Some folks can't get home from there. And if your insurance will cover the stay, you'll stay there for as long as possible, and then maybe go to what we call step down, which could be a skilled nursing facility. And hopefully you'll get home from there, but that's not true for everyone. And for folks who maybe don't need the skilled level of the skilled nursing, they might go home and have outpatient rehabilitation. So you go to an office, you get your therapy, or in-home care. And sort of the experience varies, like I said, based on your insurance and your family support and who can help take care of you and who can help you recover. And a lot of it, insurance is really driven by your progress, by your potential for progress. And so it relies a lot upon these therapists, OT, PT, and speech, to say, what are the goals? Where do we think we can get you to? And how long will that take? And then unfortunately, rehab kind of gets to decide what's good enough. I mean, not rehab, insurance decides what's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And often, unfortunately, for individuals, this is like, okay, you've had this major brain injury and now you can walk again. Great, you don't need physical therapy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can talk in short sentences, you're good. And now we meet people who are former athletes, former CEOs, people who are teachers who speaking is their life, and good enough is not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of that's where my concept kind of came to be. But yeah, that hopefully that answers the question. It can be varied. And some people come into the hospital, have their injury, and they don't even need a rehab stay. They might go straight home and go to outpatient therapy from there.
Mm-hmm.
Depends.
Yeah, when you were talking, it just reminded me of our sickness, wellness, fitness continuum and CrossFit, right?
Yep.
The insurance system's really good at focusing on getting people well, and whether that's through medications or whether it's just getting people into a range that's considered quote unquote normal or good enough, when we have this whole other side of the spectrum towards fitness that it can help us reach our full potential. And the healthcare system definitely isn't structured in order to be able to help us do that. But it can be really frustrating for someone making that transition between, being good enough, but then knowing, how do I get from here to fitness?
Right.
And it's not something that, unless you have someone to kind of hold your hand and walk you through that process, which is what I think CrossFit does for so many people.
Absolutely.
But it's obviously a different and more personalized skill set for someone who's recovering from a brain injury, that, there's not a lot of resources for people otherwise. So that's why I'm so excited about what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I talk about the sort of fitness wellness continuum in all the time with folks. And I say, we want our survivors to be well. They come into the hospital and we talk to them about lifestyle changes, dietary changes, rehab, and safety. But it sort of stops there. And my message has sort of been, why can't we help them be better than well? Recovery is really hard work, and we know that. But in addition to wanting like a better life and recovery for our clients, how much better could their function be when they can kind of move that towards fitness? We know how their brains function better. We all have that experience when you're really tired, or maybe you haven't eaten enough, or you've had a long day and you suddenly can't find the words you want to say, or you walk into a room and you're like, what did I come in here for?
Mm-hmm.
And you think about, if you've had some sort of neurological injury, that is compounded. So we want to help these folks get to that place where they're better than well. And if we know that fitness can help the brain in so many ways, why wouldn't we want that for everyone? And not to mention that, even folks who suffer from brain injury, I don't know the exact statistic offhand, but individuals who suffer from a brain injury are very likely to suffer from another one. And that's a combination of balance and coordination challenges and insight and reasoning challenges. But if we can get someone a little more steady on their feet, couldn't we maybe help stave off another brain injury?
Mm.
There's all this potential to get even more, to move that needle along that continuum.
Build more of a buffer for whatever happens. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
And I love, we obviously think of CrossFit as being fitness and physical exercise, and there's, tons of benefits for our brains in terms of physical exercise and activity. But you talk a lot too about how with your program and with in general being in a CrossFit environment, being around a community. There's so many other benefits when it comes to cognition and speech and all these other factors that are important for your clients. So can you talk a little bit about that and how other factors come into play in helping them
Yeah.
recover?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to sort of the speech and language part of it, the language and cognition goal areas, I always tell people that one of my favorite things about rehabilitating language and cognition is that these things are everywhere, right? They're literally involved in every single thing that we do. So, simply when it comes to language, there are all these opportunities in the gym to practice naming things, naming items, naming movements, describing, talking about what you did, following directions, answering questions, like from really simple to really complex. So there's this opportunity to work on language for people who maybe now have trouble speaking. Some clients are drilling names of movements, or maybe they're remembering the people in the class, or maybe they're just talking about the workout later, and there's all these opportunities. And then when it comes to cognition, it's like, you have to remember what you're doing within a workout. You have to sequence and you have to organize from movement to movement. You have to pay attention to a lot of stimuli, the coach and the other athletes and the gear and the clock and all of these things while staying safe. And there's reasoning, right? Within a workout, you're sort of making decisions, like you're strategizing. And that's a level of complex reasoning that we do, and we do it out loud, but sometimes we do it in our heads, right? I want to put this down before that last rep so that I don't mess that up. So I can, I can optimize for my performance. So there's all these ways to help people better their thinking right within this functional context of something fun like fitness, and also, like you mentioned, community is a huge aspect. Like a lot of survivors lose their community because you're not working anymore. So you maybe lose that cohort. Maybe if you have a language deficit, you're not comfortable going out and socializing with your friends because you can't keep up with the conversation. A lot of these folks can't drink anymore because of their injury. And just all of the little, one by one, the sort of social aspects go away, and these folks find they don't have a community. And you walk into a CrossFit gym and there's your community within minutes. And so it's been really powerful. And even my clients, a lot of them right now are one-to-one, but they've formed a little community with each other. Mostly on Instagram, but they support each other. They comment on the videos, they talk to each other. One athlete did a competition and several of them zoomed in so they could watch. I mean, that's just the power of what CrossFit brings to community. And that's really impactful for individuals recovering.
That's really amazing. And especially I can imagine for your clients, how isolating it can be just to see other people who are going through a similar journey and how healing that could be as well.
Yeah, very much so.
So you mentioned that most of them are one-to-one. Can you explain sort of how the process works and when they come on and start working with you, and how you customize different plans based on what the person's situation looks like?
Yeah. So, I bring folks in just like joining a gym. It's like their first session is a free trial. They come in, I put them through a little movement and language assessment and kind of see where things are at. A lot of these individuals, at least initially, need a little more hands-on support depending on their injury. And it's a lot of just modifying and adapting to make the movements fit their profile. Mm-hmm. So, they come in, we do one-on-one session, and the goal is sort of, the way I describe it is a one-on-one sort of prolonged onboarding process with the goal of getting individuals into a class eventually. Because I feel like if folks always need to be with me one-on-one, then they're not getting what we really want to get out of this whole shared community experience. That being said, for some people, one-on-one, just like anyone else, personal training is how they want it to be. Mm-hmm. But it's really as simple as that, just kind of modifying, to their specific profile and seeing their language and cognitive needs. And sometimes I can get them to a class, and sometimes they're like, no, I think we'd rather do this one-on-one, which is also totally fine. I have one client who's in his 50s, his 30-something-year-old daughter comes and works out with him. So they have a little community, it's all whatever works for people.
Mm-hmm. That's so great. And you have some incredible stories on your Instagram, just highlighting some of your clients. Could you share with, just some of your, the stories that come to mind of people and how this has had an impact on them?
Yeah, sure. One of my favorite stories to tell is about the individual who kind of started this all for me. That really was the guy that I was like, he really needs to get into a gym. And he was in his 40s. He'd suffered a major acquired brain injury, had a big brain bleed. And he was a former soccer player, yoga enthusiast, an athlete. And this big injury left him unable to speak. And unable to walk, he didn't have use of his left side, essentially. And as he was starting to recover, I was like, we got to get this guy in the gym. And one of the things that was interesting about him was once he started to walk again, he walked as if that left leg, he didn't have function in his hip, but he had full hip flexion on testing. So in isolation, it moved, but when he walked, his brain just didn't connect. So we got him into the gym, and within a few sessions, he was squatting to depth, running, box jumping, doing all kinds of functional kind of movements that he had thought were long off the table, that running was something he'd never be able to do. Yeah. And a couple weeks into it, I got a text message from his wife that said, oh my God, he just helped carry in the groceries and put them away. And that is such a big thing for people who just don't engage in everyday tasks anymore because of their injury. And he was really proud of himself. And that's like such a big functional carryover.
Totally. Who would have thought, that he'd be so excited to put away groceries.
Right. But it's like, we forget that like, hey, you can carry things and you can move things around. And he felt steady enough on his feet to do that. But he was a good one. I mean, they all have great stories. I have another athlete who has a he's a degenerative disease. And he was a big time athlete, really good at sports, all into high school. And he was wheelchair bound by the time he got to college. And he did a little bit of CrossFit in his day and tried to compete a little bit in the adaptive division, but with his degenerative disease hasn't been able to do as much. And when I first met him, what he said to me was, he's in his mid-20s. He said, I don't want to be in physical therapy for the rest of my life. And he was like, I want to do this. I want to be an athlete again. And what's great with his sessions is that we're able to find a balance between things that are therapeutic from a PT perspective. We stand almost every session just so he holds on to things, but he can get up and stand out of his chair. And then some days we just hit a workout really hard, and so that when it's over, he's like, oh, you got me good, I can't talk, it was a good workout. And right. But he's been able to build muscle mass, which is counter to medicine based on his disease process. And he's had some improvements in his heart condition that comes with his disease process. His cardiomyopathy is actually getting better. So there's just all this really powerful impacts for people.
Wow. Yes. Exercise is so powerful.
So powerful.
The most powerful drug out there, if it was a drug.
So true.
That's incredible. Yeah. And I the videos are amazing. I think if people are listening and can go check out your Instagram, I definitely would. I know there was one of you working with a young girl, and it's just amazing to see how creative you are and being able to work with people to move their bodies in a functional way, which I don't think you see in any traditional rehab setting. So
yeah, no, and she actually, if I can talk about her for a minute too, because my Instagram loves her, Marina. She's 10. And CrossFit has reposted her a couple of times. Everybody loves Marina, is what I always say, and rightly so, because she's 10-year-old. She also suffered a major brain injury, a bleed, a result of likely an acquired condition. And one of the things that's interesting about her, she doesn't speak yet, and she doesn't really use her voice even. It's hard for her because of her, she has a language disorder, but also an apraxia where she can't coordinate breathing and what you need to make your vocal cords move to make voice. But one of the things that's really interesting about her and really interesting about voice is that a really good way to get people to voice without thinking about it is to grunt and yell. And we do that by lifting and heaving and pushing. And so we get her in the gym and she's doing kettlebell deadlifts and now barbell deadlifts and ski erg and all these things that involve pulling and pushing. And when she does that, her voice comes out. And from that, we've carried over a little bit. She'll count reps when we're doing stuff. So she's moving her lips. She's not always getting the voice and the articulators to move at the same time. But the fact that she can do those two things in such a functional context is so great.
That's so great. Yeah, it was really cool to watch. So what would be your dream in terms of being able to use what we're doing in CrossFit and the affiliates that we have all over the world to be able to help bridge this gap from what's possible in sort of our healthcare insurance rehab system to getting people to where they want to be? It's a big question.
It is a big question, but it's certainly something I'm thinking about all the time. My biggest dream is that I want there to be more access to services like this for people. I get inquiries from folks all over the world, and I always want to know, where can I send them? Because even without sort of the neuro specialty that I have, I am a firm believer that any good trainer can do this, can modify fitness, and can change people's lives, which we see in our everyday affiliates all the time. So, my goal recently has been sort of to design some training to help give people the tools that they would need to really understand the neuro population. Because I think in some ways there's a lot of, I don't want to say fear, but there's a little bit of mystique. You look at brain injury and you're like, ooh, what do I do here? I don't understand, especially if someone can't communicate well, or has, such short-term memory deficits, they don't remember the things you say to them. People sort of like, I don't know how to interact with this person. But at the end of the day, these are just individuals. They're all adults largely who lived a regular life until their injury, and there's no reason we can't pull them back from that. And so I would love to be able to provide the tools to other gyms and other trainers to say, hey, you can do this too, because we can change lives. Like you said, that statistic is 5.3 million people living with disability from their brain injury. And for some people that's physical, and for some people that's only cognitive, and for some it's both. And so there's all these opportunities, I think, just to help people get better, especially particularly where traditional medicine leaves off. How can we people, my slogan is better than good enough. So my goal is just, how can we get people to that place where they're not just good enough, they're better than good enough.
And I love that.
Thanks.
So what would you say now if someone emails you that, doesn't live in Boston, and they're in this situation and they want more help? Where do you advise them to go, or what resources do you guide them to?
So my first offer is, I tell people that I'm happy to hop on a call and learn more about their injury profile and see how I might help them virtually. Followed by, if they do have a gym that they're connected with, I'm happy to connect with their coach. I have a client actually in Germany who he's a CrossFit coach. And he suffered a stroke, and the head coach there reached out and was like, how can we help him? And so we do sessions together, me and his coach, in his gym in Germany. And so it's sort of first and foremost, can I help you in any way right now? If you have a gym, I'm happy to, liaise and talk with your coach or help any coach through the process. And then if folks don't have a gym, I do my best to reach out to gyms in their area and see if anybody would be able to take this client on and offer them whatever help I can give them. And then from there, that's what I'm still trying to figure out. Like, how do because you don't always get responses. And I always tell, this is kind of actually what I said to Austin. It's like, when I travel, I go online and I look at all the gyms and I pick one based on the website, right?
Sure, yeah.
Generally, or their class schedule. And, I'm always hesitant. I don't want to this is a vulnerable population. So I don't want to send them just anywhere. So I go through and I'll email 5 and maybe you'll hear back from 2, as a little aside, but it's sort of that, how do we find the right balance? And so I think what I'm hoping to do is grow a network. But in the interim, I'm just like, hey, tell me what you need and I will do my best to find someone to help you. And I do have a lot of virtual remote clients for those who can't find a space to go. I just, have a client in London, I have a client in Italy. We hop on Zoom and we do the thing.
Yeah. Now we've got Zoom. Everybody's comfortable with that. There's so much you can do. And I love the idea of partnering with someone's local coach in person too, and sort of being able to help them feel more comfortable and learn through the process, but empowering them also.
Yeah. And I think, the Adaptive Training Academy is such a great thing that I always encourage coaches. It's a 1-day seminar and you can learn everything you need to know about adapting for seated or single arm or single leg. And sometimes with our, neuro population, that means they've got one good arm and one good leg. And so trying to kind of organize things around that, but the modifications are widely applicable and they're not unlike scaling and modifying in a regular class. So I think trying to kind of take away the sort of mystique around that, just say, hey, like, we know how to do this. We know how to work around injuries. It's just taking it a little bit further and adding an added layer of safety. So just trying to help people feel confident and empowered.
That's great. Well, I do want to start wrapping up with 3 questions I ask everyone at the end of the podcast. So the first one is, what are the 3 things that you do on a regular basis that have the biggest positive impact on your health?
CrossFit.
That's always my answer too. I feel like it kills like 3 birds with one stone.
Yeah. Wow. Personally, I work out as much as I can during the week, and I eat well, and I have a nutrition coach, and I encourage my clients to eat better because it's also really important for brain health. to have good balanced nutrition. And like I spend most of my time taking care of my clients, frankly. I try to sleep well so that I have the energy to do all the things that I need to do. I feel like those are such standard answers, but
no, that's great. I think for that question, sort of standard and boring is probably good. It's hard to do the things that, we all know what's good for our health, I think in general, but it's hard to actually do them every day.
Yeah. And I tell people, like, I'm an inpatient clinician still at Mass General. So, through working front lines through all of the worst of COVID, I got up every day and I worked out first thing. And then I went to the hospital for 10-hour days and worked with really sick individuals. And then I came home and laid on the floor or stretched and then got good sleep. And people say, "Oh, you're so good. I can't believe you get up and work out." And I would say that's the only way I can do this,
Right.
Because it is so important to take. We always say, we talk about care for the caregivers. So if you're someone who's caring for other people, you got to take care of yourself first in order to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Put that oxygen mask on yourself first.
Yeah, exactly.
What about one thing that you think would have an impact on your health, but you have a hard time implementing it, or something you're working
on? I think I could do better at disconnecting a little bit from, particularly now as running sort of a program where I feel like I'm on social media all the time because I'm checking in on everyone. I think I could use to get away from all of the digital in my life. I'm not very good at that. I can be honest.
It's such a tough balance. Like you said, there's so many important uses for it, and it allows us to reach people and communicate with people. Like you said, just being able to see some of the stories and the impact that you're having on clients, and for them to be able to connect with each other is amazing. But it is one of those things that it's hard to have boundaries with, or to figure out how to use it in a healthy way. It's something I know I'm definitely still working through too. So
yeah, I think we all probably are, right?
And then the last question is, what does a healthy life look like to you?
What does a healthy life look like to me? I think we throw this word around, but I think a lot of it is about balance, right? Mm-hmm. Time for you, time for the things that are important to you. Taking care of others, I think, is an important part of just being a balanced individual. Mm-hmm. Eating well, getting sleep, which I know a lot of us don't do, and honestly, fitness on any level. I tell people, if you're not going to go work out, that's fine, but please go for a walk. Mm-hmm. So I think staying active is just super important in our global health for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that, like you said, during this pandemic time, I think it's put a focus on how important a lot of those things are for all of us. Yeah, wonderful. Sure. Well, this has been great. I'm just so excited about what you're doing, and I hope that you're able to reach even more people and get more people, give people just the hope and the ability to see that there is more than good enough out there. I think for so many people, we just accept, it's amazing to see the people who just accept, like, well, my parents have diabetes and had heart disease, or this and that happened, or this is what my doctor says is good enough. So that's, I guess, what it is. But there's so much more. We all have so much more potential than that. And so thank you for showing us what's possible for your patients with brain injury. And for people who are listening who want to connect, maybe they're also a therapist who's looking to be able to do more of this, or maybe there's someone who is going through a brain injury, or family or friend. How would they connect with you?
So, my Instagram tends to be the most powerful, even though I tell people to email me, they want to chat on Instagram, which is totally fine. And that's Fit to Function Recovery, which is also my email, fittofunctionrecovery@gmail.com. And I do have a website, but I feel like people don't use websites that much anymore. So, any which way that people can find me, I'm happy to help in all of the ways that I can.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jenna, for everything you do.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you or someone you know has a story to share on a future episode of Pursuing Health, please write me at info@pursuing-health.com. If you enjoy listening to the podcast, please also consider subscribing and giving it a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really does help to get the word out to more people.